Let us start off the class by chanting Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. All right. Pariññā Sutta. So page number 148 on the Sutta. The discourse of full knowledge. Pariññā. So when we say Pariññā, Pariññā, the word denotes a sense of fullness, right? I think in Sinhalese, we have the word Parinata, right? Parinata Bhave, right? Which is the ability of being able to, or being full, being collected in terms of the knowledge, in terms of knowledge and the application of that said knowledge as well. Right? Page number 148. The link to the sutta is on the website. Monks, I will teach you the Dhamma regarding the full knowledge of all clinging. Listen to it. And what, monks, is the Dhamma regarding full knowledge of all clinging? Dependent on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. Dependent on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. The meeting of the three is contact, phassa. With contact as condition, there is feeling, phassa, paccaya, vedana. With seeing this, the learned disciple feels disgust towards the I, feels disgust towards the I, towards form, towards I consciousness, towards I contact, towards feeling. The word disgust here is drawn parallels with the term viraga, right? Viraga. The bringing about of dispassion towards the specific elements that have been spoken about in the sutta, right? Viraga. Feeling disgust, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind, through dispassion, he is liberated. With liberation, he understands clinging has been fully understood by me. Clinging has been fully understood by me. Dependent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. Seeing thus, the learned noble disciple is disillusioned towards the ear, right? Seeing thus, seeing denotes the arising of wisdom, insight, right? Seeing thus denotes the arising of insight, wisdom towards the experience. The learned noble disciple is disillusioned towards the ear, towards sound, towards ear consciousness, towards ear contact, towards feeling. Feeling disgust, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. With liberation, he understands clinging has been fully understood by me. Now you find the repetition moving on through the five senses, right? And how that respective dispassion arises, the disgust leading to dispassion. The disgust arises towards not the physical existence of the phenomena, which allows for all of these processes to happen. The disgust arising by means supported by insight then connotes the disgust that arises knowing that this base of contact happens due to the mix of these three aggregates. Owing to those three aggregates, the contact arises. How do we know? The clinging arises, I'm sorry. How do we know? We know this because at each end of experience, disgust, and then dispassion following, the end result is clinging has been fully understood by me. So the disgust is essentially about the role and the method by which clinging leaches in through the existence of the rest of the conditions. Do you understand? Let's look at the next paragraph and try to see whether we do, right? Dependent on the nose and smells, dependent on the nose and smells, the prasada now active, the base, the ayatana now active, right? Nose consciousness arises when the prasada rupa is present, when the base is active, the manasikara in working, nose consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, now what does this contact? Passa. Passa is a position at which the mind now lingers or interacts with the object that has arisen at the pasada. Owing to the four factors, chitta, mansikara, aloka, and pasada rupa. Remember, right? Owing to those four, supported by those four factors, the contact now arises, linking now the pasada and the object that has now fallen upon the pasada. Seeing thus Seeing thus, seeing what? Insight has now appeared in direct relation to this process. This process. Now, when we say seeing, we understand at this stage an understanding procured by the Dhamma within oneself, and the application of that respective Dhamma, one understands that earlier, before this insight appeared within a person, within me, I interacted with the object as me, myself, and I. That was the result of the clinging. The clinging is no problem. But what makes clinging a problem is the result it has on our life. And that is the avidya created by the tanha. The avidya makes us feel that this experience is me, myself, and I. So the insight, seeing thus, applies to that result of Atma. Atma, now seeing Atma within yourself, seeing Atma in the experience, experiences drawn through the 5 sensory doors. That is what, seeing thus, the learned disciple is now disillusioned. What was the illusion which was present? The Atma, the Atma Sanya, the self-perception. Towards the nose, towards the smells, towards nose consciousness, towards nose contact, towards the feeling that arises, towards Vedana itself. Towards Vedana itself, through feeling disgust, he becomes dispassionate. Now, disgust is a very strong word, isn't it? Right? It almost gives us a sense of pilikul. Pilikul, isn't it? What's the English equivalent of pilikul? Foulness. Yeah? A sense of foulness in a certain way, right? Pilikul, right? Here, however, disgust applies at a more mind level, where now earlier we enjoyed that dew of ignorance. We enjoyed the experience of thinking that this experience is me, myself, and I. To the person who has now through practice started seeing, he now is able to cultivate this sense of disgust, viraga, towards that process, right? He becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. What does it mean to be liberated, right? Now, yes, we can talk on this, on the aspect of enlightenment, but if we reel it back in, if we reel it closer to become relatable to ourselves, right? When we cling, when we are attached, the object now starts controlling the way that we react, live, behave. Owing to that clinging, conditioned by that clinging, right? Conditioned by that clinging, we now, our lives become controlled, right? Controlled. Now, for an example, we know very young children, when they want something, right? Of course, because, when they want something and they want something bad, they can become quite agitating. agitating, right? They can become a little bit too focused. If they want ice cream, they want ice cream. They will cry, they will howl up until you give them something. You have to give it something to please the child, right? Now, that is a very good example, I believe, right? Now, as adults, we might not behave in such a manner, but we know how our minds twist, turn, manipulate our own intentions when we really want something. That is created due to the bond between the experiencer and the object. What is this bond? Clinging. That bond is clinging, right? That is the part where now our mind starts working in different ways. We become manipulative. We might become, strategists. We now start devising plans on how to get things that we want and all of that. That part is a clinging attribute, right? That itself is clinging, right? Now, moving forward. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. So liberated, that connection between the individual and the object is now not fueled. Hence, the connection being broken, the mind, the person is able to make decisions, live, think, not attached to the object. Not attached to the object, not engulfed by the pleasures or the pain of the object, right? With liberation, he understands clinging has been fully understood by me. Dependent on the tongue and tastes, tongue consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. Seeing thus, the learned noble disciple is disillusioned towards the tongue, towards taste, towards tongue consciousness, towards tongue contact, towards feeling. Feeling disgust, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. With liberation, he understands clinging has been fully understood by me. Dependent on the body and touches, the body consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. There is feeling. Seeing thus, there is feeling. Seeing thus, the learned noble disciple is disillusioned towards the body, towards touch, towards body consciousness, towards body contact, towards feeling. Feeling disgust, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. With liberation, he understands clinging has been fully understood by me. Now, dependent on the mind and mind objects, right? Dependent on the mind and mind object, mind consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. Seeing thus, the learned noble disciple is disillusioned towards the I, towards form, towards I consciousness, towards I contact, towards feeling. Feeling disgust, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. With liberation, he understands clinging has been fully understood by me. When it comes to the mind, we find the mind, which the Pali equivalent is mana, and mind objects. When mind objects and mind consciousness arises, the meeting of the three is contact. Now, this phassa that arises, do you think this phassa can be stopped? Can we not have the phassa arise?
No, I think Buddha himself discussed this one in the another sutta I mentioned last time. I can't remember the sutta. Last sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. Lot of during Buddha. Sorry.
The both is Parshvadharmas.
No. There's another last sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. Last sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. Now, because at that time, during Buddha's time,
yes, Damsari, go ahead. I was drinking water.
Yeah. Okay. yeah. Because during Buddha's time, teachers actually recommending Passa Nirodha. And Buddha very clearly said that you cannot do Passa Nirodha because you have to understand full process. That means it's a feeling and Vedana, Passa Vedana and Tanha. And then Tanha will give rise to the clinging, which is Upadana. Right? Am I right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
However, I would like to also know what the others think. Do you think that Passa can be stopped? Do you think that Passa is something which is avoidable through the practice?
Yes, I think it happens when you meditate and when your mind is in ekaggata. It does happen at that time. Otherwise, it's not possible.
Okay, Shriyani. Anyone else?
It doesn't happen.
Why?
Because it's only, the break is Pachapasya Vedana. That's where you, with meditation, and that it can break. Others are almost automatic. That's the way I understand it.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Can I add that it actually in the Paticcasamuppada, it explained that actually the breaking point should be the tanha or delusion. First delusion, and through delusion you have to stop tanha. Then once you stop the tanha, the deeper tanha is the clinging. Or deeper version of the tanha is the clinging. So naturally, once you reduce the tanha, then the clinging will not go ahead, because clinging is actually the teachers explain that actually clinging is deeper level of tanha, right? And so the break point should be Paticcasamuppada, very well explained that break should be actually through delusion. Once you get rid of delusion, you try to control your tanha and not tanha to develop to a level of clinging, right? So that's the break point for. So the passa is a mere mechanical process, and once you have a prasada, I prasada, or any prasada, and the object, then it automatically comes the passa, which is a more of a natural thing, right? And then which followed by feeling, and then of course then go into the tanha. What do you think about that?
I'm trying to be quiet so I don't start a war here. I'm a bit afraid of all of you. Yes. Well, within the Abhidhamma, it does not within the Abhidhamma, it does not explain a process where we stop passa. However, Vipassana meditators experiences states where the passa or the object at hand, the cognitive process is not carried out with regards to certain objects that arise also, right? That is an experience that Vipassana meditators have. Within that experience, this experience is explained in this manner. When or with what we have learned pertaining to the taking of objects, right? We know that within this process, the taking of objects happens. If it is a specific sense door, and the Panchadvara Vajana, the 5 sense door adverting consciousness, does not apply in respect to the appearance of the object at the sense door, right? For example, a loud sound, right? However, the person is in meditation. The precision of a scenario of that sort is the mind being taken deeply into, having taken deeply into the object of the meditation. The Panchadvara Vajana does not appear with regards to that loud sound which is to be heard. Owing to the situation of here, the mind object, and the mind consciousness arises at the meeting of the 3 is contact. During the time of meditation, we experience contact. This contact is then forms the basis of the object by which we go into a state of samadhi during the time of meditation. Dependent upon how profoundly we are engaged upon the object, the passa in relation to the other object which could arise does not arise. However, the passa has the capacity, the object has the capacity to become a very great object. Ati Mahantarammana.
Yeah,
A very great object. However, because the mind is already subdued by the existing object, we do not experience a phassa contact into another object. The phassa is inherently, or the arising of the new phassa, the new contact, the arising of the new phassa, the new contact, is a break of the samadhi that has already arisen in the past. So samadhi becomes past by the arising of a vitarka, breaking the samadhi from the present. Now allowing a new phassa to arise. According to the Abhidhamma, and also as I remember with the sutras, phassa is a mechanical process. A process linked to the process of seeing itself. And seeing needs that contact to be able to comprehend the object which is. Give me a moment. To avoid the object or the changing of that said object. Now, let's go back. Dependent on the body and touches, the body being the pasada, the touches being the what is felt at the pasada. Just like the tongue and tastes, which denotes that the tongue is there, and then there is an object as well there, present, right? Present. The body, and when the body conscious, so the body touch, the pasada, the aramana, and the vijnana. When these three are present, the mind will automatically conduct a process of phassa. However, the phassa, even when, now let's go into the rest of the lines. With contact as condition, there is feeling, phassa paccaya vedana. Seeing thus, the learned noble disciple is disillusioned towards the body, towards touches, towards all of that, right? Now, when it comes to Paticca Samuppada, the law of dependent arising, at what point is the cycle, the law of dependent origination broken entirely? That's a question, by the way.
Can I try to answer?
At
Yes.
phassa.
At phassa.
At the phassa. At
No.
phassa.
Tanha.
Phassa
Phassa.
paccaya vedana.
Definitely phassa.
Phassa paccaya vedana.
No.
I think the question wasn't clear. At what point, meaning not a point within the Paticca, at what point of a person's life does or is the cycle of dependent origination completely broken?
Phassa nirodha.
I will say avidya.
I also say what Mala says, avidya.
Avidya.
Phassa nirodha, I think.
Not avidya, with
Maybe it's Pariññā.
No, not avijja is the opposite. No, avijja is delusion. So it can't be broken at delusion. Just be at pariññā or vijja.
Now, okay, but I was relating to, okay, at the level of Sotapanna, Anagami.
Yeah, Sotapanna.
Huh?
I think Sotapanna, partly avidya is still there, isn't it? Partly at Sotapanna level, it begins to eradicate sleep.
So another Samma Ditti,
Okay.
correct way of seeing the object.
Okay. So then does if we say samadhi, then what position is that person who has that full samadhi?
Anitya. If we know the object is
So then are you
Anitya or
saying
Arahat state. Arahat.
at an arhat stage, who would, I mean, can you explain that?
The higher five is only eradicated at Arahat level, isn't it?
Okay, so avijja and tanha are both eradicated at the stage of arahat. So does that mean that Pariññā collapses at arahanthood?
Oh, Bante, yeah, everything arises. What that called? At
Rise and
once,
fall.
something arises and
False.
what that called? Pajyati nirujjanti.
Rises and ceases.
Arises and ceases. Everything arises, ceases.
That's
it. And then
That's all correct. That's correct.
when you die, that's when you die.
Shriyani, would you like to explain your point of view, Shriyani?
Passa Nirodha is everything starts with Passa, and also if you it's difficult to explain it because I understand the system, because I have studied through the sutra. This is Passa Nirodha is when you're walking. If you take the walking meditation, at the touch itself, you see the Passa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vedana. All that happens immediately, and it disappears as it comes and goes, comes and goes. So
Okay.
that's how I understand.
Okay. Comes and goes.
Passa Nirodha that is where it stops. Passa and Passa Nirodha.
Passa Nirodha. Or who experiences Passa Nirodha?
The meditator.
But not all meditators? No?
The meditator.
That's very generic.
No, not because you have to.
It's not me, myself, and I.
Now we are just throwing everything that comes into mind. Right? At what point? Now, what is important, or the question here is, at what point does the cycle of Paticca crash?
When you attain arahat.
All right. If we say that it is at a stage of arahanthood, how does the arahant experience? The arahant also has passa. The arahant also has vedana. The arahant also has sanskara, vijnana, isn't it? Does he not?
Vijnana paccaya nama rupa, Bante. Vijnana paccaya nama rupa.
When the arahant passes away,
Arahat won't cling to
Sattara Satipatthana itself is there, isn't it? The Sattara Satipatthana, it is within there.
Oh, තියෙන දේ කියන්නේ නම් අපිට. මොකද්ද තියෙන්නේ? Tell us what's there then, Shriyani. which it is when no longer creates new karma. Right now, that is sanskara. That is the karmic energy, right? What we have, because the Arahant does the Pariññā cycle, is it applicable to an Arahant? What do we think?
Bante, if we can't we stop at tanha?
Clinging. There's no clinging in Arahat.
We can stop tanha by understanding, Bante.
I think they stop at
If there is no tanha, then no feeling. So to stop tanha, we must have correct understanding.
But you still
Arhat has experience. Passa is only passa. So therefore he doesn't have the sankhara.
Okay, so then what is the cycle by which an Arahant lives by?
I think it goes the other way around, because it goes like a passa vedana sanya sankhara, but then it becomes like a sankhara. Then it goes the other way around, because he is not developing any sankhara towards because he has no sankhara, because he doesn't develop vedana, he doesn't develop tanha, he doesn't develop vedana passa like that.
Okay.
Ditta mattang.
Okay. Okay.
Bante.
Yes, Lakshman.
Sute Sutta Matta Vijñāne Viddhānta.
Okay.
Bante, can I say something?
Yes,
Because the Arahat hasn't got avijja, it stops at the very first stage, isn't it? Arahat hasn't got avijja.
Okay. So then can we say that the Arahant, after the attainment to the Arhata Phala, that he now no longer operates within the cycle of dependent origination?
He is not collecting sankhara because of the knowledge.
But sanskaras exist.
Vipaka nahi Rahatan Hansala.
Ratan Vanselaata
doesn't do the
no vipaka.
Vipaka kriya.
Kriyasit.
All vipaka? All vipaka? All vipaka?
Kriyasit.
Kriya.
No.
Only he does. That's the kriya.
Functional.
The people who are going to listen to this recording are going to be confused. Right.
I think Bante, you should stop the recording.
You must edit it and get rid of us.
They will think our group is very knowledgeable.
Because when it comes to the position, when it comes to a position of Pariññā, we have within the Pariññā process, we know the process which surpasses the usual process or Pariññā. That process is based upon the understanding, or rather is based upon dissolution. Remember, it's like, it usually appears like a snake-like chart, right? Right? There's a circle, and then on the top of the circle, it sort of bends into another few characteristics, passaddhi and these, right? Now, it is called the transcending dependent origination. Remember, transcending dependent origination. Now, in the transcending dependent origination, can you hear me? Because I feel like there is some sort of
Mante, it's occasionally you break your voice actually.
really, I think,
Yeah.
Let me knock off my other devices.
There's an echo. No?
Yeah, there's a bit of a signal.
Tarak.
There's an echo, Bante. That's
Is there an echo? Let me just check. I'm sorry.
that's all right.
Now, is it better now?
Yes.
Okay. So when it comes to transcending dependent origination, the transcending dependent origination starts or is understood through the fact of dukkha, right? Suffering becomes the patch from which, or the bridge rather, that we cross over into the path of the transcending dependent origination process, right? Transcending dependent origination process, suffering, faith, commitment, contentment, right? And so on, all the way up until nibbida, right? Which is the enlightenment process, transcending dependent origination. Now, when do even arahants at the time, of attaining to a state of nibbana, or when they attain, there is also something called upanisa, or going above the mundane paticcasamuppada. Now, this is a lesson altogether, right? That is a lesson altogether, right? Because we have the mundane dependent origination and the lokottara sequences of dependent origination. We will do that at a separate class, right? When the lokottara dependent origination arises, or when that part is now the way that we form, whatever energies now we produce are not complacent with the old conditions. Remember, in the Mogok Paticcasamuppada chart, I told you to look through it, remember? Right? The core of Paticcasamuppada is Tanha and Avijja. This is almost like the molten core of the planet Earth. Why has Tanha and Avijja formed its core? Because our world is created based on the conceptualizations of perception devoted to those objects perceived through Tanha and Avijja. Now, when it comes to an arahant, phassa exists, but it does not exist in the same spirit, surely, as it existed when we were mundane beings. Now it exists on a different spirit. And it is at this level that sute, sutamattang, ditte, dittamattang, all of that comes in. Because now sankharas arise, but sankharas that project, manifest a rebirth do not arise. So do not make the mistake of saying arahants do not have sankhara, because they do, but this sankhara does not create rebirths. Do not say that arahants do not have karma vipaka. When you do think of that, think of Venerable Mahamoggallana, right? Think of the Buddha not having water. Think of all these karmas that even Buddhas, powerful beings, spiritual beings, even such as Buddhas, had to undergo. They do undergo karma vipaka, but they do not produce one specific type of karma. Karma leading or karma energy that produce rebirth linking. Why? Because bhava tanha is no more. The need to become, the craving to become is no more, right? But that is all the arahants. How does this apply to us, right? How does this apply to us? When we remind ourselves of the chitta viti process, when we remind ourselves of the chitta viti process, the chitta viti process, when it receives or has an object that arises within the word to use is sphere of experience, right? Sphere of experience. When the object arises within the sphere of experience, right? Because we can't say that we have experienced it up until the chakku viññāna arises, isn't it? Right? Do we know that the object has arisen before the chakku viññāna? Actually, even at chakku viññāna, we do not know as yet. It is actually at the process of javana, the impulsions, that we truly know, right? But of course, the mind runs this process. When it enters the sphere of experience, this is when the bhavanga process, which was running, is now disturbed. When disturbed, now the mind turns towards this object which disturbed the person by entering the sphere of experience. Do you understand? No? Right? Now, for example, to make it more clear, I am looking forward. Not sure which side is north or south, regardless, I'm looking forward, right? Now, if I am looking forward, my sphere of experience with regard to sight is this, isn't it? It's not this with regard to sight. Now, of course, I can see because I see the back of my camera, right? The camera. However, if my sight is looking forward, this is my sphere of experience when it comes to sight. This would change as I move my eyes, right? It is the same thing. Now, sounds, frequencies are present, but not all sounds and frequencies are heard, isn't it? We can't hear sensitive frequencies. We do not have the capacity to do so, right? We do not have the capacity to do so. The sphere of experience, when this sphere has an object, that object can cause now the mood, the change of or shift in what we are cognizing, right? So from the perspective of Phassa, if I look, Phassa will arise. Even when my eyes are closed, now there are lights all around. As I close my eyes, now I don't want to look, right? So I'm closing my eyes. However, I see the reflection of the light through, I see the redness. Even when I don't want to see, I still see, right? This is a mechanical process. So where or how can this process of clinging be separated from the being? The process of clinging cannot be separated up until we attain enlightenment. But that does not mean that we cannot practice it or make the exposure of clinging less, right? Now, for example, let's say, there are people who are very devoted to Apple, right? I don't mean the apples, I mean the technology, Apple, right? So the world is divided into two people, Samsung people and Apple people. Right? Now, take that, you're a hardcore Apple user or you're a hardcore Samsung user, right? Now, being an Apple user, for you, right, you don't care about any other phone. You don't even research about any other phone that has come into the market other than November when the new Apple phone drops, for example, right? Now, because of that is the thing that you want to, the clinging has created a bond between that and the object, right? That is the clinging process. This is conditioned, and this can be reconditioned to like Samsung as well, right? That can be. Because it can be reconditioned, you now have the ability to condition the mind to grow liking towards things that do not support lobha, dosa, moha. Because it is in a position of lobha, dosa, and moha that the fire begins. The inquenchable, right, inexhaustible fire which burns and consumes everything. So the only way to keep this fire going is to feed the fire, as the Buddha says. That fire arises because of lobha, dosa, and moha, right? Of course, we can speak in terms of Paticca we can speak in terms of many sorts of dhammas, but at the end it is lobha, dosa, and moha, these three mentalities. The conditioning now falls from lobha, dosa, moha to alobha, adosa, amoha. This process of liking or reconditioning chanda, desire, lessens the dependency over the need to quench the fire. And it creates a dependency over that which is wholesome, kusala. Now, as a result and a bipartisan of that process is the Manodvara Bhajan. In other words, mind or adverting in English. In other words, the Vottapana, the determination process. The determination process is the judgment maker. It judges, actually, it's not a judgment, that is wrong, completely, entirely wrong. No, not the judgment maker. It is what connects the object to the attribute present in the mind, or the attribute the mind has taken as a habit. That is why, if it is easy to explain with negative terms because it's so gross and understandable and sometimes so relatable. You know, even if a person does something good, we suspect. We have been frauded so many times that we suspect, you know, we are careful. Right? I'm learning this now, you know, working with all these scammers who, you know what I mean, you know, doing charity project. It's like, right? You know, you doubt it, right? You doubt it. The Manodvara Vachana shift here happens, as the Buddha says. How does this Manodvara Vachana shift from Ayons Manskara to Yons Manskara take place? That is, first of all, the first phase is we have to make it less gross. We have to stop depending on feeding the fire, right? That happens through the shift of akusala to kusala. But a kusala person also does not attain nibbana because the attachment to kusala. Again, attachment to kusala is the attachment to wholesome sankhara. Now the shift must take place from wholesome sankhara to, what did the Buddha say? To lokottara dhamma. So, akusala, kusala, lokottara dhamma. When it is the lokottara, that is why, if you remember, the Eightfold Noble Path has two parts, the mundane and the supramundane. The mundane represents the kusala. The supramundane represents the lokottara aspect, of course. The lokottara aspect. The lokottara aspect, what did the Buddha say? The person who contemplates the arising, the passing away of the five aggregates is that one who attains to Nibbana. So impermanence, suffering, non-self, resulting in disgust and dissolution towards the five aggregates is lokottara. Is lokottara. Nowadays, because of I'm back, aren't I? Okay, I'm back. I think we lagged for a moment there. Nowadays, or rather those days, the shifting from unwholesome to wholesome, supramundane happened quite fast, right? Happened quite fast. Hence, people like Angulimala, Patachara, these people were able to attain enlightenment so quickly because of prior training and sansaric support. Nowadays, however, we are the people who miss the opportunity of attaining Nibbana. Why, when the Buddha was living 2600 years ago, we have been that unfortunate group of people. We have, you know, no need to sugarcoat it. We have been the unfortunate few who have been unable to attain Nibbana at the time of the Buddha, right? at the time of the Buddha. But I do not think that we were the people who were speaking ill of the Buddha, because then I would assume that we would be in worse planes rather than the plane that we are currently, and on a very, very different pathway of life. Now we are devoted, but the thing is, our faculties were not strong enough at the time, matured with Dhamma for us to learn. Maybe we were animals, right? Maybe, possibly we were animals, or possibly we were in, I don't know, we were not there, right? The shift from unwholesome to lokottara, surpassing the pathway of wholesome, happened quite instantly with the teachings of the Buddha. For us, because that nurture factor, or rather seasoned factor, is less, hence we find ourselves having to go through unwholesome to wholesome, wholesome to lokottara, because the mind is so gross. Right? Just think about it. Think about it. Yasa and his how many friends? Yasa and 60 friends? Or 54? Remember? I'm supposed to remember this.
64, no? Yes, 64, wasn't it?
Yes, okay. 60 odd, right?
Yeah.
Just imagine, right? Yasa and his 60 odd friends, these people, they were wealthy, they were people who enjoyed, they were people who were into the sensual pleasures upon hearing the Dhamma. All of them, 65 in all, became monks, became enlightened. Became monks, became enlightened. That was due to the fact of prior training. Wholly due to the fact of prior training. Or else, the sutras allude to the fact of that these collection of friends pass from lifetime to lifetime with a common goal in mind, thus being able to do what they did, become monks, become enlightened, all as friends, and also do something extra. Go forth into the world and dispense that same Dhamma. Right? That is actually an example of group karma, which we'll be speaking on Sunday. Right? This effectively speaks of a way then, through the conditioning of manodvara vajana, slowly but with fierce energy, we can come into a position where the dependence of the mind can be slowly maneuvered from one thing to another. A good example is, for example, when you first got married, you know, the attention was always on the both of you, the couple that got married. But then when you had a child, both of your attention switched to the child. Right? That's a very good example right there. The attention, or what we base as the center of our life, can change. This sutta speaks of that possibility of change, which is brought about by bringing in the insight which changes the action of the manodvara vachana. Now the manodvara vachana, which saw potential in pleasure, sees the potential of release. Right? The potential of pleasure within the object to the potential of release. How is that? Is that true? What about the fires, the stories of the monks who attained Nibbana whilst they were burning? That is a switch of the potential of pain to the potential of release, right? To the potential of release. Kisa Gautami, pain. She was going through enormous amounts of pain because her whole family had just suddenly died. She switched the potential of pain from the object to the potential of release. That switch comes by that conviction that we have. That is where the Shraddha comes in. But the Shraddha arises because of the suffering. Because of the suffering. But seeing or experiencing suffering is not. Experiencing suffering is not the main aim of the game. It is in seeing the suffering which is actually the main aim of the game. To see the suffering for what the suffering truly is and the maneuvers and the ways by which it affects the way that we think, behave, and live. How do you see that? Now, as we've read so many sutras, we've done so many together. You listen to so many sutras on your own, you do your own research, you read your own books, you know, all of these things, isn't it? We know, we have an idea about what the path is. We have an idea about what anicca, dukkha, anatma is. But that is also part of the problem. Because now, that data, which is what you or I assume as anicca, dukkha, anatma, entraps you within that theoretical knowledge. Right? What if the Dhamma is taught, the Buddha said, I am only the path sure. I am only the path sure. The Dhamma alludes a path, directs you in a direction, and it is your responsibility, should you have the need, your responsibility to see. But knowing the Dhamma is not effectively seeing. Don't you think? Knowing the Dhamma is not effectively seeing. Now, for example, when we were at the time of practicing Vedananupassana, we experienced a lot of pain, right? Shoulder pains, back pains, thigh pains. I mean, we still experience pain when we meditate, right? So when you think about meditation in a sitting posture, doesn't it pop up in your mind, oh, this is probably the pain I'm going to experience? In that pop up, which happens, that is an entrapment of mind towards an experience. The Dhamma too can entrap the mind towards an experience. But when I say Dhamma, I'm referring to the way that we understand and see the Dhamma, we individually. So when I think anicca is this, we must clearly understand what the Buddha again said, recollecting. I am only the path sure. It is your responsibility to walk on it. What does that allude? What does that say? That whatever he has taught only gives us some light and direction. The walking within that light and direction or towards or in that path is our responsibility. That has been alluded or spoken about when the Buddha says the person who reflects upon the arising and the passing away in each and every moment. Back in the day, you will find that Dhamma Desanas, Dhamma talks were the Buddha did not prepare these things. No, people came and asked him questions and the Buddha responded. Right? The Buddha responded. The Dhamma was something which was very, very, what would the word be to use? It was a very free-flowing thing. It was not an organized, structural kind of thing that we see today. With the Nikayas, these things came along with the preservation of Dhamma, right? So that we could pass the Dhamma along the generations for the benefit of many. The Dhamma was essentially, Samantha uses the word raw, right? However, I'm not sure whether raw is the best word to use. It was just something which was, I believe, I'm trying to sort of find the word, which was so authentic, which was so from the heart to a heart. It was never meant to be put into a chapter of sorts, right? Because remember, in the history of Buddhism, Dhamma usually died away soon after the Buddhas died. Because our sasana was so short, the lifespan of our Buddha was so short, this brought about the need to preserve it, as the Theras thought. Right? In history, because Buddhas lived for so long, as the Dhamma lived as long as the Buddha lived. Right? Learning from that, this is not in any way to disrespect or devalue what the Theras have done. The reason we have this Dhamma is because of, but we should never assume that this is a regimented process. This is an experience-based present moment practice. And with the Dhamma, the strength of the Dhamma depends on the purity of the mind. The strength of the Dhamma depends wholly and entirely upon the purity of the mind. The purity of the mind, what I am speaking of as purity, is the fact that perception, understanding, being able to arise with pristine quality to produce insight within a person. Or else, why else is purity required and necessary? It allows the mind to cultivate insight. When the mind is fresh, we have creativity. We know this, isn't it? Right? When you're less stressed out, your creativity, your ideas, all of this suffers. So we find huge corporations, Microsoft, Facebook, Intel, all these Dell, all these corporations having, feeding its employees free food, having beds at work so that they can take naps and all of these things, not because they want their employees lazy, because they know having a stress-free environment is key to better performance. When it comes to cultivating insight, purity brings about stability of mind, which brings about insight. Hence, we practice meditation. Why? Because by nature, the mind clings. Understanding this nature through meditation, we are able to operate without that clinging. By nature, the mind can sometimes become irrational and restless. Through meditation, we can bring the mind to a state of calm bliss and the present moment, allowing that insight to appear and arise. Back in the day when the Buddha taught, there was pin drop silence, it says, right? Because why? All the attendees present were meditating. It was a meditative process, right? It was a meditative process, contemplative process. As the Buddha spoke, it was like a aha moment. So much so that these aha moments led to enlightenment within these people. The insights bloomed, right? The insights bloomed. So this sutta speaks about the mano dwara vajana now being conditioned through insights, to move from akusala to kusala, kusala to lokottara, supramundane, allowing the person to slowly now, through understanding in every course, experience through insight, come into finding through insight the true reality of this mechanism, the true reality of this mechanism, right? Of this mechanism. Right. So that is the end of the sutta.
Pin drop silence.
That is forced because one is on mute.
Bhante, can I ask a question? The use disgusted. I think in the upper section of the sutra, it says the translation is nibbida.
Okay.
Yeah. Nibbida, yeah. This
liberation is vimokha, coming about from viraga.
Yeah, viraga is the dispassion.
Dispassion. Okay.
And yeah. But other thing is, Bhante, this sutra is applicable to, or these conditions are applicable to noble disciples.
Yes.
Right? So that means we won't be able to see these things until we go into sort of deep insight meditations and things like that. Yeah.
Damsiri. Buzzkill, Damsiri. No.
Yeah.
I believe that understanding the way, the reason Arahant's minds have been explained so well and throughout the sutras and the Abhidhamma is to allude to us the way the mind of an Arahant works, hence teaching us the path of practice.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Hence teaching us the path of practice.
Yeah.
You know, it gives us an understanding and insight into, because it is our kilesa-filled mind that also becomes an arahant. But at that time, we learn to get rid of the kilesa.
Yes.
Right? So this alludes to the pathway. This alludes to the pathway, the path that we sort of click. Now, why? Because usually why I thought this sutta was very viable to all of us is because sometimes, if we want to, let's say there is a specific habit of ours that we are not very happy with, but we also enjoy it, right? let's say food. We very much enjoy food, right? But food is, we have a love and hate relationship with food often, isn't it? Because it's something that you can enjoy so much. However, you eat, you get sick, all of these sort of things you experience which are very unfavorable to the person, right? A person might, without understanding, might think that food is the problem, right? Whereas food is not the problem. It is the mind that is the problem. It is the inability to see why we choose or we are unable to say no to food that is the problem, right? That is the problem. Understanding that it is then not the food gives us a tiny insight into wanting to find out, okay, what is then the problem? Why do I want to eat so much? And that is what, even in Western psychology now with regards to food, that is what they try to sort of denounce, isn't it? You go for therapy if you have issues with obesity or food issues, eating disorders of any sort, right? Of any sort, and they take you into a journey where you realize, okay, why is it that I hate food, or why is it that I love food so much, right? The Buddha taught us to observe that 2,600 years ago, right? 2,600 years ago. And that is exactly what this sutra says. Understanding now then we have to go into three parts. What is the tongue? What is the taste? And what is the tongue consciousness? Why do they arise? When we ask the question, why do they arise? Now appears the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths. This gives us the ability to then break apart our initial understanding of the situation and cultivate a more pristine form of understanding, which is more with reality. That is the beauty of an Arahant's mind and the explanation of an Arahant's mind, right? That is then the value of the sutra itself, right? So then, for example, we give and we give and we give and we give and we give sometimes, or we work and we work and we work and we work. I think like we work so hard, isn't it, for families and all of these things. And I don't know, like maybe even with like in the West, with America, UK, all these Western countries where childcare is not cheap. Children sometimes depend on their parents to take care of the grandkids. It's almost like a we'll take care of you if you take care of our grandparents kind of situation also exists in these countries, which is quite sad because it is almost as if that the parents haven't done enough already, right? Of course, not all children say this, but some kids do, unfortunately. And sometimes I've spoken to people who they're so tired, isn't it? So tired after years and decades of working, taking care of kids, having to go through all of that worry, and now having to do that all over again. When you just got happy that your kids have grown up and left the house, now there's a new bunch. Of course, it's lovely. It's lovely to be with grandkids. They're so fun. But, they can get a little bit too much as well, and you don't want the burden, right? and that sense of lightness that appears, you would imagine, I mean, circumstances of life are such that you cannot have the perfect circumstance that you want. So what do we do? That is where, in the Noble Four Noble Truths, this is like having the person who understands it is a person who has like a bottomless bin almost. Everything that you experience or else we throw into this bin, which collects into all the stress that you have. When the bin doesn't have a bottom, now you don't collect anything, right? That kind of a situation can only be brought about by the practice of Dhamma, by the practice of Dhamma. Regardless of however much vacations we go on and all of that, it can be truly a relaxing process. However, it is only in that sense of through Dhamma practice that we really, really experience a true sense of lightness, a true sense of lightness. Yeah. So, yeah, that is the end of the session. That is the end of the session. I was actually so tired today. I spoke to Devika and I was like, Devika, like I have so much of pressure. I was trying to sort of, but then she was like, oh, Bhante, I'm really looking forward to the session. I think she didn't get the point, I was trying to hint at her. Devika, is it okay if I cancel the session? But then I was like, no, I need to do it. I need to do it.